Hello, everybody, and let's exit the board. Hello, dear Grumbles.
Hello, my dear friend Tiger.
We are once again here in the podcast, or whatever you want to call it, Portcast. I think that's a nickname that's kind of settled with a lot of people now, the Portcast. Yeah, I'm really happy with the name.
I'm really happy with it as well. I love the fact that every time we're like exiting to port in battle or on stream, there's usually someone who's like, "Oh, when's the next podcast?"
It proves that the branding works.
It does.
The branding works. Right. We have a bit of an episode in front of us today. We've just had our editorial meeting.
Hey.
And before we go through the topics, yes, we are trying a completely audio-centric version today. It will, of course, be on YouTube, as you already know, if you're listening there. But we're also available on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts through iTunes, I think it is, and Google Podcasts. Honestly, I've lost a bit overview over how many platforms we're available on, but we are available pretty much everywhere. So if you just search for Exit to Port, you should be able to find us.
And of course, don't forget, I mean, you probably know this again if you've already picked it up there, but probably in about 15, 20 years' time, will be available on some dodgy old CD that you pick up at a bric-a-brac store or sale in your local IKEA on a Sunday when it's shut.
Yeah, you'll find this Grumble CD. Yeah, you know Grumbles. Yeah, this was before he made it big on Twitch. Like, he's huge on Twitch now. He's got 100K viewers now. This is before that. He was hanging out with this weird Norwegian guy. There you go. £5 for you. £5. I don't know why a guy from Brooklyn's charging you in pounds, but it's fine.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. I'm working here. Right. So, we've been talking a bit about the subjects we want to go over. And it's gonna be a bit worships heavy today too, as per usual. I don't know what kind of time limit we have on it. Do we have a time limit?
I don't know. I feel like I've got a good 6 or 7 years left in me. So we'll just play it by ear. I think we'll just ramble on and see how we feel.
Yeah.
In a couple of hours' time. We always say that. I always think we'll get like a good hour, an hour and a half content, and then like 3 hours later we're like, it's midnight. We should
probably
head and then start our streams. Yeah.
So today's topics will be Deadeye, our quick and simple solution on how to rebalance it in its current form, although we already know that it is being rebalanced and redone, although we don't know how. But we'll see. We will also be talking a bit about secondaries and how to bring them on par with Deadeye so that it's not just that one thing. We're going to be talking about CVs. We're also going to be talking a bit about partnering on Twitch and some D&D, and of course, lastly, we're going to bring back the ever so joyful something to smile about.
Indeed.
And before we continue on in, both on my Discord and Grumble's Discord, there are channels where you can send in questions or reach out to us. We ask that the questions be taken there. That way we can bring them into the next episode for comments or whatever it may be.
Yeah. It makes it a lot easier for us to curate or, mass delete the channel. It's just a more efficient process for us if we need to.
Yeah. Also, it will, of course, help the conversation carry on forward to know what people want to talk about. So that it's not just us two bearded fellows speaking about whatever we want. With that being said, let's jump straight into it. Deadeye and why it's a problem. So I've become an avid listener of Statsbloke, Killer Bin, and Painzor's podcast called Stats Funk.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, very Warships heavy content, them all being partners.
Wait, do they play Warships?
CCs, and I think, is it Killer Bin that's a super tester?
Don't ask me.
Yeah. But yes, they all play Warships. They all play it competitively too.
Mm-hmm.
Statsbloke, of course, being a fairly big Warship streamer on the English market. They recently talked about
7 feet
that.
too tall.
Yeah. 7 feet. Wow. One
Must be really expensive buying shoes.
Yeah, 1 foot less than Sleipnir. Odin's horse. I took a weird turn, I won't lie. Anyway, they recently talked about Deadeye, and part of the issue there, and I feel like I want to bring up what they talked about there.
All right.
Because part of the big problem with Deadeye is the fact that you kind of only need 10 points to make it work on your captain. Unlike a secondary captain where you need at least 14. Now, with 14 on a Deadeye, yes, sure, you'll make it even better and even easier to use, but there's no need for fire prevention on your Deadeye captain ship.
Effectively, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like you, in order to play Deadeye, you basically need 10 points because you need, let's say, gun feeder in order to be able to switch shell types quickly, grease the gears to get your main battery traversed. We were talking a bit about what tier 3 skill or such is good, but I think we landed on Adrenaline Rush just being the best one. Because,
generally, between that and basics of survivability,
yeah. And then lastly, of course, Deadeye. That's 10 points right there. If you want to go secondaries, we're talking something that has way heavier cost because suddenly you're in way closer. That means you're being pelted with secondaries. You're being shot with everybody who has high explosives. You're going to be a main target for torpedoes, meaning suddenly you need fire prevention to reduce that. You might need some basics of survivability or longer secondaries, all depending. But the fact is, like, there's not enough points to make a secondary captain viable compared to Deadeye, that is. So I feel like one of the things that could easily do something about Deadeye was that if you needed a second skill together with Deadeye to kind of make it viable. Or, of course, let's reduce the amount of points it would take to for a secondary captain to be be more attractive to the general populace. What do you think?
I think that for me, it's one of the questions for me, or maybe to fill out the context a little bit more, is what do we see as a response to this from the player base, and why are we always comparing or regularly comparing as our other people these kind of skills? And I think that the reality is that the sniper skill allows you to sit back, or as the player meta has kind of evolved in the recent couple of months, actually drive further back than even you spawned in a lot of cases, or at least stay there. And obviously the brawling stroke secondary, or the secondary specifically we're talking about, being in close. So for me, this is important because it's about the dynamic of battle, and about not to use a trigger word too much, but like how engaging battles are. again, this is maybe just obviously a psychological aspect or whatever, and a play style thing. But for me, it's incredibly dull to sit back and just wait 30 seconds and then click again and so forth. Yes, you get that very, very short-lived, like microsecond buzz of like, oh, a couple of citadels, cool. Or maybe you're chuckling yourself and face palming or something because you can't believe what you just did in your Vermont at the back of the map. But, that then comes the 30-40 second wait versus being full on in the action. So I think that this is important because it's not about an individual player, an individual ship. It's about the entire flow of gameplay and the pace of the game. And we talked about this in a previous cast, was the game had slowed down. Certainly for me, when we spoke about it a couple episodes back, was painfully slow to the point where the game had lost a significant amount of fun as a result. So I agree with I think we're talking now about the next stage of like, how do we counter it? How do we not counter it in the sense of in-game play, but in terms of improving the skill variations so that there's more viable builds out there. I think we have to be a little bit careful because both you and I love the brawling aspect of it, and so there's an element that we lean a little bit towards, trying to get that as close to awesome as it can possibly be, at the detriment of others. I think there's enough space for both variants. I think that either. I think synergizing and bringing the skills together, you're right. I mean, you could have something like, just for silly argument's sake, if you selected what would it be called? Like a subclass or a variant or something of your ship where you said, I'm going for an assault or brawling loadout, then, they could give you 25 points instead of 21 points. Just for silly example, right? I mean, that wouldn't work because then you'd have to grind out all those extra points and yada yada, right? Or maybe things get discounted and become more affordable, or certain skills that get unlocked for those different variants, so that you couldn't pick I want the sniping skill on top of my brawling skill.
I just had an idea, if you don't mind me jumping in here.
No, jump in.
Like, just off the top of my head, I don't know if you're familiar with how the old class tree in World of Warcraft worked.
Okay, no, I don't know it.
Okay, so I used to play a rogue, and in rogue, in the way early start, there was assassination, there was subtlety, and combat tree. Now you had X amount of points for X amount of levels. And in order to be really good at use of your swords, so that it would be easier to hit things, and in some instances you would need that, you would have to go combat. But the other trees had their own special talents and everything. So let's bring this over to World of Warships. Let's have a brawl tree, let's have a sniper tree, and let's have a secondary tree. So, and with brawling, I mean, in this case, somebody...
Like survivability kind of thing.
Yeah, somebody coming in close and using their main guns. Whereas snipers, you stay back, you get you get plenty of advantages for doing that. And then there's the secondaries, where your secondaries will be massively buffed. Now, there's some overlap between the brawling tree and the secondary tree, of course. But there's also some overlap between the survival tree or brawling tree and the sniper tree. But in order to kind of, let's say Deadeye is at the end of the sniper tree. In order to get there, you will have to invest a lot of points to get down there, meaning you won't be able to get the really nice juicy things on the tanking tree or the secondary tree. Now, one of the things we talked about was that, for instance, choosing Deadeye would block the ability to pick up stuff like close quarters or fire prevention or whatever. But I think this would be a better way of going for it. Like you have to make an active choice where you'd want to go.
Yep.
And I think that sounds way more like what Wargaming wanted with this update rather than what they've achieved.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you fully, and I know something similar from like Neverwinter Online, I think it was, and the same sort of thing. You'd go down one of like three typically paths, 2 or 3 different paths depending on your class and so forth. And I agree. I think this is what and maybe they have a roadmap in this direction. I think maybe that there's maybe a sidebar talk at some point about what's in the roadmap or what could be, and I guess this is what feeds back into it. I think that due to the fact that there's probably not a lot of information about where they want to develop this forwards, right? That's one of the challenges that we're faced with, is that it feels a lot like it's going to be a one and done. A little bit like CV Rework, where they just did they've done quite a lot of tweaks and changes, but more like tiny little adjustments here and there, tweaking things. And anyway, we'll get onto that topic. But the problem is that precedent is there, and it feels like, well, how much is this realistically going to change? And I think what they've tried to do with the point distribution is kind of get in that direction, as you said, but it doesn't, you could probably argue it doesn't go anywhere near far enough, which is funny because if you look at some of their tech trees and that, and maybe I think more about World of Tanks in this regards, or War Thunder, it makes me think of that a little bit as well, where you have to, decide where am I grinding for? What am I really aiming for long term? Because if I pick this line, I'm definitely not going down that line for a long while, and with a lot more effort. So, and I think it would have been arguably better to do it here, whereas everyone's kind of moaning about the amount of points you need here, but I think it's because the goal isn't that clear either, as you said, because you can basically mix and match and you can even pick the skills that are completely, almost irrelevant to a certain ship, not so much in a class anymore because of the way they split it. So that's a good split. But I'm disappointed that whilst there are different loadouts, it's like one per class. And I would have preferred, we've talked about this before, I think on stream, I would have preferred it to say, well, leave it being a battleship captain. That's my choice because I prefer to play those. But give me 2 loadouts. Give me like an assault or a brawler loadout and a sniper loadout. And then I have to pick carefully for the ship I'm taking out, that kind of thing. But I think there's lots of different ways they could slice it. Maybe it's just that there's a lack of a sort of a vision of where this is going to or how it could develop, and they've kind of locked themselves into a certain position right now with it. I think I agree with you as well, the synergy between the different skills, where there could be some overlap but too much. The ideas I would have, following on what you said, would be or maybe I take it a step further, and this might sound a bit crazy now, but we were also beginning to touch on the longevity of the game and where does this go in some of our recent conversations. Maybe you take it slightly more in a direction of your loadouts being like class oriented. So for example, and they have this already in some of the buffed and some of the scenario battles, like in the Big Hunt right now, what if in random battles you also had something like you could pick healing oriented skills or a support set of skills, so that when you use your consumables, maybe the ships around you in a certain radius received also some healing.
Well, I'm not sure going full fantasy with it is a good idea. However, what I really would love to see is for them to be able to go in and say, okay, we want to give more points for actually performing your job, and if you split that up with the tanking and such, you suddenly have a role you're supposed to do. So and I've said this before, I will say it again. Let's say you're a sniper. Okay, well then your job is to deal damage at 15 plus kilometers. If you're a brawler, then your job is to deal damage from, let's say, 18 to 12 kilometers. And sit there and soak damage. and heal.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're a secondary ship, your job is to push into the cap, and the longer you stay in or near a cap, like within 3 or 4 kilometers of the cap, and the more secondaries you get to utilize, the better.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued about this idea. I like it. I like the idea, because ultimately, what would I like to see happen from any of this? I'd like to see more team play, and I'd like to see people rewarded for performing their roles, if you will, and helping their team towards victory. And at the moment, it's kind of a very loose. Well, you win or you lose. So if you did well, you've got a much higher chance of winning. But it's kind of, that's not enough. And I think one of the biggest challenges the games faces is encouraging and actively rewarding the team play, other than just the you won because 2 or 3 of you got together and rocked that side of the map or something.
Yeah, so, let me ask you this:
Mm-hmm.
how many times have you sat in a DD and smoked somebody up, where they have been given the ability to sit there in the smoke, heal, and do everything they need to recharge their health and get out of combat, without being given any sort of point for it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 2 sides to that story. One is, I've done that often, and you just do it because you're trying to be a good team player. And sometimes it works out and you get a thanks and they use it up, and sometimes they don't. But either way, at the end of the day, you're right. Mechanically, there's no recognition of it in any way.
Okay, here's an idea. So the smoke is very often used to allow people to either engage from it without being seen, as in, let's say that they stay out of combat, like they're not engaged, they're not being shot at or anything. Or it is to be able to break combat, like you are in engagement, you break combat, you break line of sight, and you get out of there. And I'm just thinking on the fly here. What if the job of the destroyer, like, because we have different types of smoke, right? We have the British smoke, where it's very short lasting. It's literally just there to break line of sight and to get out. Whereas you have what has been seen as the American smoke, which is on the Friesland and the Gearing and so on. Long-lasting smoke to be able to allow gunboats to sit there and really go nuts. What if they had that kind of baked into them? Like, let's say you pop a smoke for somebody in your gunboat, in your American DD, and you sail on and you spot for them, but they sit in your smoke and they deal damage. You get XP for them being in your smoke and dealing damage.
Yeah, I guess that comes down to a little bit of like the damage upon your spotting mechanic, and maybe they need to clean that up somehow, make it more effective or buff it in some way. But yeah, I like the idea that if there was something that registered that you'd popped your smoke, that if an ally was within it, not a div member or anything like that, just someone else in your team is in that smoke, and then you leave that smoke, if that then triggered a modifier, 0.25 times extra spotting damage upon your spotting XP or something.
Well, not just necessarily damage upon your spotting, but also just damage done. Like, somebody is in your smoke and does damage.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. So they then pop a radar and see another enemy ship, start hitting it, so you didn't technically spot it. But yeah, so this is what I mean, is I would say that should be categorized. I was using damage upon your spotting as a category. But yeah, I'm totally down with that idea. I think that, because that would be an obvious sort of, in this word, like in air quotes, buff to team play, right? It would be another encouragement for people to help each other out. I fully agree.
Because we're again rolling back to kind of the MMO idea, but we're not going fully fledged in there with a healing role or such. But we're talking about using your skills and and your ship in a way that it applies as a bonus to your team. Now, there are also certain skills out there that are purely egotistical, but then again, you have that in other games too. So, yeah, like the encouragement of team play for certain classes out there that aren't really set up for a lot of what should we say, self done damage. But you're there to enable others.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's one, right? Rather than this like that taking it too far with the MMO, but what about you could have a skill like you've got basics of survivability at T3 as an example, or maybe something like emergency repair expert at Tier 4. What about a more team play oriented one where if you took the brawler path or the secondary build path, those kind of skills that are about recovering from damage or healing, what about if you got your instead of it being separate skills earlier in the tree, like consumable experts and stuff like that, what about if you then got a buff because of that subclass you'd picked or that whatever style, you got a buff that like the brawler gets a 10% cooldown on their damage control party.
Yeah.
By picking that subclass rather than a specific skill, or bake it into one of the, or you bake it into basics of survivability, and then you have separate lines to it underneath that says, if you take the brawler build, this also includes a 10% cooldown reduction on your damage control party, because they know you're going to be in the fight, and then it's up to you whether you go in and have that triggered or not by how you play with that particular style.
Yeah, and the whole idea of supporting each other, helping out, and getting better at that is amazing. And it kind of like we mentioned a bit about healing. It wouldn't necessarily be healing, but it would be help to repair somebody. War Thunder has a system where you can ask for repair help from others.
Yeah.
And it suddenly makes the repair of your tank go from, let's say, 40 seconds to 7 seconds. Could you imagine, like, okay, you're sailing around battleship, you've taken a lot of damage, and then you start your heal. It's this old slow heal. It takes a while, but you know there's incoming damage, but you also have a destroyer friend right next to you. So you request help. He helps you repair your ship, so the heal goes up quicker. Like you regain your HP faster, and then you're good to go. Maybe even a tiny more, like because this person helped you out or something. Like, so you don't necessarily have the support ship role, but you have the ability to help out others, and you'd get points for it, of course. Like helping somebody repair should get points. And again, that encouragement of team play, that encouragement of using your abilities. Like hell, maybe some cruisers would even be specialized towards applying your heal to others.
Well, you know what they've done is they've funnily enough gone a little bit in that direction. I think more with the cruisers. There's probably one or the other battleship one, but they've gone and they've used some of those kinds of mechanics, but all of them are based typically on, like when there's more enemy ships spotted near you than allies. So they've made it all about yourself, your position, and the opposition, which again leans more towards the individual's performance.
Yeah, and it's the outnumbered one, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but that shows two things. One, they're still stuck in this one track mind of it's all about the individual, because there's no benefit to anyone else of that skill. At best, the benefit is through that extra reload, you end up killing a couple more ships because your guns are more effective, and therefore the team goes on to win. But that's such a stretch to say that that's got anything to do with the team. It hasn't, right? Right. But the other thing it proves is that they have the ability, live in the game to apply these kind of mechanics, meaning that, for example, say instead of a brawler, well, like say a secondary ship, imagine, I always think of a secondary ship as being more of a supporting. You're there to soak damage up, to do damage with and cause chaos rather than punch really hard, right? Like a sniper or an all-out brawler would be. So in my mind, again, maybe this is too much MMO, but this is what I think would be really cool and fun for people going forward, is imagine that instead of having a heal that you can then heal others around you, which, as you said quite rightly, probably goes too far in that direction. What if they just use the mechanic of when, you know, allies within 7 kilometers of you, if you've got the support stroke secondary build, have a 10-second cooldown on their damage control party, because they've already proved they have that mechanic, right? They're just using it differently.
Higher accuracy towards a target you keep lit up or something. Yeah,
okay. Anything within your secondary range. Okay, I'm going to go with a really controversial one, but just for the sake of the conversation, you know, their spotting bloom goes from 20 seconds to 22 seconds. Good example. But, you know, like, you could do things like that.
Because you are literally being kept spotted. Like, there's somebody looking at you, giving away your position. Yeah, like, there should be an effect there, but...
Yeah, because your ship is literally going through the enemy cap, for example, doing jazz hands, going, "Hey, look at me."
But again, all of these things are wonderful. The ideas are cool and everything, but they won't help squat if Wargaming can't tell you if it's live or not.
Oh, well, that's another valid point.
Like, you are going to have to keep your eye so glued to the mini-map in order to know if Outnumbered works. Okay, for anybody who doesn't know, Outnumbered is a cruiser skill on your captain. Tier 4, meaning it costs 4 points. And here is the exact wording. Can be activated. Improves your ship's characteristics if there are more visible enemy ships than allies within the firing range of your ship's main battery. So you gain ship speed and better dispersion on your guns if you have more visible enemy ships than allies within your main battery. How is this a cruiser skill? Why isn't this on a brawling battleship?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, back to, but yeah, the just as a side point, I think the one where that works, ironically, is some of the Russian radar cruisers that have stealth radar.
Yeah, but at the same time, how do you know if it's active or not? You might, for all you know, you have 17 friendly ships behind you as you fire it up, and it'll do you squat.
Well, I think maybe this is part of the roadmap. Maybe eventually we're not going to have this dynamic, active, you know, screen in front of you with where the ship is most part. Maybe it'll be 90% mini map, right? Will actually become a mega map, and you'll have a tiny little mini map sized box in the corner that shows you video footage of what's actually going on your ship. Okay. Because you're right, because to know whether any of these skills are working, you have to kind of stare at your mini map and not pay attention to the torps you were failing to dodge.
So we're going from World of Warships to Football Manager World of Warships. Yeah.
Battleship Manager 2021.
Oh my god, I would so play that. I would so play that. Anyway, let's get back to Deadeye, which we were talking about.
Yeah. Were we? Okay.
Yeah, we were. So Deadeye is 10 points. If you want to be survivability or anything else, you gotta invest way more. I would love to see that each skill has a major buff. So let's say Deadeye, 10% better dispersion is really good on certain ships. But I'd love to see it be really good, but you need a drawback. And as a drawback, I feel like the drawback from super heavy AP shells would be perfect. For secondaries, I'm not saying that we should just buff secondaries and that's it. No, you need a drawback. I honestly feel like a valid drawback for going for secondaries is to reduce the range of your main battery.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's just off the top of my head. So
yeah, I
then
hesitate a bit on that one.
And then close quarters combat, where you gain better reload speed of your main battery, and they get more accurate and quicker to swing around and such when it's active. Okay, yeah, but then you have a shorter range on your secondaries. Like, there is an active drawback, but you've made a roll on how to play your ship so that you know that you need to stay within these parameters. And then there's this very clear-cut banner going, "This is now active," you know? So you know that I've now activated this talent, and this is my role. And I think we mentioned it a bit last time with the key battles and everything. Like, when you switch out a weapon or a hull type or such, there's a very clear-cut difference. Like, there's there's a visual change to your ship, so that it's easy to identify. We're talking about a Gale with super torpedoes, or whatever they're called. I can't remember since last time. But yeah.
So I like to take that idea as an aside, and then in my mind I'm picturing you have your Georgia, and then if you take the secondary build, this isn't a serious suggestion, right? But comically, it'd be funny if you then looked to the Georgia and it suddenly sprouted like half a dozen more secondary turrets, and they're just all over, like odd angles, like welded onto the side or whatever. So it was like you just glanced at it, you're like, oh god, no, that's a Georgia with a secondary build, and it's closing the gap on me.
It literally has an Atlanta strapped to the side.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be quite funny, but I agree with you fully. I think all the skills need some kind of visual representation. I do think that Wargaming have done quite a good job over the years of making it sort of subtle, to the extent that the game hasn't lost that immersion of what it's about, these World War II ships not brawling, but battling it out.
No, I'm not talking a major change. Like, I'm talking like a different colored flag or whatever.
I think I agree with you fully. I think that the key thing is you almost have to make it that you need somebody to have to engage their brain and think about it for a moment. But you want it to be no more than like 1, 2, 3 seconds, that you can just glance at something and go, oh. Or you can even glance at something and misread it or whatever, and then, derp into the brawling battleship because you thought, oh, that's a sniper. He's just pushing in now. It doesn't matter, And
then 3 seconds later, it's not a sniper!
Yeah, it's not a sniper! Run away! Oh, God. Yeah. Exactly. It's too late. Damn it. Go for the ram. Go for the eyes, boo. I do think that there's something for it. I had a thought while you were talking about Deadeye, and I don't know, I'm going to run this by you, but what if the Deadeye, instead of working the way it works now, where it's like nobody's spotted within your concealment range, yada yada, so people tend to drift and be further back and away so that can't happen, right? What if it was the opposite? They just flipped it around right now. Nothing else changed. They flipped it and they said you have to have at least one enemy spotted within your basic concealment range.
Ooh.
It literally just occurred to me when you were talking, right? Because what would you do if you'd have to go big, no concealment builds.
Yeah.
Right? Which means you'd then be lit up for all the 20-kilometer HE spammers that I also don't like. But anyway, we're sticking to battleships today. I just thought, imagine if you just flip that one parameter around so somebody had to be spotted. So then wouldn't all the snipers then have to just push in because they'd want to be getting the 10% buff by having enemy ships spotted within their base concealment range.
That's actually really good.
It literally just occurred to me. I don't know. There's probably a flaw, and someone will go, well, that wouldn't work because, well, whatever. But it occurred to me while you were explaining it before. I thought, they just flipped it around, the mechanic.
I'm down with that. Like, okay, yeah, I can go for that. Can we... I would love to hear what others think about that idea. So if you have a comment regarding that, pop into mine or Grumble's Discord, find the the channel that allows you to comment and
My channel's literally called Exit to Podcast. You can't miss it.
I should probably call mine that too. Yeah, let's just edit that on the fly.
You're welcome. I'm waiting for the feedback on my Discord that says you do realize that channel's closed and no one can actually post to it. I'm now frantically checking the permissions.
There we go. Right. Exit to podcast feedback. There we go. Now it's dreaming. It makes so much more sense. It makes. I'll be honest. Yep. It makes way more sense. Yarp. 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 Yarp.
Yep.
So we've talked about like how to change a bit on Deadeye, how to bring it aboard, how to make changes to it, and we've touched on classes. And I feel like this is a really like, honestly, it's a natural segue to the next one that we need to call or want to talk about, not necessarily need to talk about. And this is something that, even though it's a long time since it happened, people are still going on about it. I'm one of those people. It's the CV balance and change. And we're likely not going to see anything happen, but you can hope. So let's say that we are in a world, in a role where where we have these class changes. Like, people have made active choices towards different things and so on. Because one of the classes that make the most active choices in playstyle are CVs, with what planes are available for it. We have everything from the Kaga with wonderful torpedo wings to the Hakuryu with AP bombs. We have the always lovely Tiny Tims on the Americans that just absolutely slaughter everything. But so you naturally enhance those. But one thing that they also talked about on StatsDonk that I really liked, like the interceptor skill. I don't think I know anybody who uses that. I don't think I've ever seen anybody use that. And it's honestly, it feels out of place for something that costs 3 points. To iterate to those wondering, Interceptor is a 3-point skill on your carrier that turns the patrol fighter consumable into an interceptor, which adds more patrol radius. They are invulnerable against hostile fighters. However, I promise I'm not having a stroke here. However, it does not attack hostile fighters and does not spot hostile ships. The no spotting there, I like it. The fact, like, also, why wouldn't an interceptor go for fighters?
What exactly is it intercepting?
It's clearly intercepting attack wings, such as rocket planes, torpedo bombers, and so on.
It's going for the strike aircraft.
Yes,
right?
it's going for the strike aircraft. So yeah. I feel, and this is what they brought up, I feel like that should be the default fighter. I feel like that should be the default choice if you don't make an active choice towards what fighter you want.
I kind of agree, but I think, well, it's just a matter of time before everybody realizes that that's rubbish and changes anyway, isn't it? So I think that could work for a short term. I'm not sure if that works long term.
Yeah, I'm just saying here. Okay, so they make very active choices in how everything is set up. Like you have air supremacy, where aircraft restoration time goes down. But I feel like one of the first things you should have to make a choice on your ship is, what kind of fighter do you want? It's either that, or this is something you choose when you're out there flying, and you're supposed to deploy these interceptors. So you know that, okay, there's strike aircraft heading down towards my friendly battleship because he's low on health and he's very alone. I'm gonna plop some interceptors near him. That
Defend
way,
that area.
that way they have a larger area and so on, so that you say yourself, okay, this is where I want to do something with my fighters. Like we're almost back to the old RTS style carriers here, but you make a very active choice on where you're sending it. You're not just dropping it where you're out flying.
Yep. Well, that for me is the biggest bugbear with the fighters. I'm not against carriers or massively like as a CV main or something like that. I think they're just a fun variant. I think that there's too many flaws, like fatal flaws. It's not just like every class has already got the one or the other thing. Like HE spammers, I don't know. I don't really understand why HE spam and the fire meta gets a free pass every time. There's always something else that takes the headline. I think I have some suggestions as to why that is, but overall, it doesn't make sense to me in the meta because the fires and the spam meta and that's been joined by torpedo meta in the meantime as well since the recent reworks. Are as much. The classic for me is just the 21-kilometer Hindenburg. Like what? And then they give it a firing rate buff and say, "Oh, we're done with that ship now." It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, so I think the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems I've had with CVs as a CV. As playing the CV is kind of that the fighters are useless. The only thing you use them for is spotting. And that is because primarily they are attached to your strike squad.
Yeah.
So and I don't want to go back to the RTS. The people have forgotten that the RTS was just as bad, if not worse.
If not worse, yeah.
Because ultimately, it's still true to an extent. If you get a good CV player versus a not very good CV player, then the team that got the good player is going to have a harder time of it for sure. That's true. That's because they're overall very strong. But in the old one, it was deadly. You were just ruined if your team got the not so good. If you got me in the old style one, you were in trouble because everyone else would have probably been a little bit better than me, and you're probably going to lose. So I think that the fighters being attached to the attack squadron makes them almost useless for anything except you happen to be flying over a particular area, then you can drop them, cool, and everyone thinks thanks, it's awesome, but actually you were just coincidentally flying past. Because nobody realistically, even though the planes are fast and whatever, realistically in the, I'll call it heat at the moment, some people will smirk at that idea for the CV players, but you're not, during the 20 minutes of the battle, you're not going to take 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, or in total maybe 4, 5, 6 minutes of your time to fly your planes out of the way, your attack striking squadrons, out of the way to where they're not being useful, just to put fighters down to support somebody, because actually you're just as likely to get your mandatory report at the end of battle for that anyway, because you weren't attacking and doing damage and helping win.
I was literally just going to say that because I've done that in fights. I've gone out of my way to help my team to spot and keep things lit up and get my fighters out to the one Friedrich der Grosse on the map border. That is him. I need support. I need a teammate. Get back. He's just spamming all the commands. And I get out there and I drop fighters for him because he's being singled out because he's alone. And then what happens? Oh, yeah. The rest of the team reports me. And he probably did too because he felt like he didn't actually get any support.
Yeah,
so,
probably.
So I've done that so many times. And honestly, a very simple choice for me, a very simple solution for me, is to remove the spotting ability from aircraft. Like, yes, you can see others, but there needs to be some change to it. Like I realize it would be silly to remove all spotting ability, but I feel like it should be more a consumable. Like once per flight, you have like a sonar buoy or something you can drop or whatever, just to be able to have that ability to see there.
Yeah.
That way, it's not the fighters, it's not something else, but it's an active consumable. And once you run out, you're out. You know.
Yeah. Hey, Ezekiel, get the binoculars out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he drops them off the side of the ship, and you're like, oh, you, Ezekiel.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I'm with you. So here, I like your idea. So what about, or here's a hybrid. So I'd like the fighters to be separated. What about, you talked about actively choosing and everything. What if you actually had to choose a loadout before battle? Or there was a penalty during the battle. So by choosing, so what if you had fighters, but the fighters were separately deployable, right? And they could spot, but they went to a zone, or maybe they couldn't spot, right? They went to a zone and they did the defensive job, and that was what they were there for. That's why they existed. But they would fly out from your ship, arrive at an area, do their defensive job or whatever, but it wasn't a spotting job, and then you're done. Then what if you could choose that your loadout, instead of having torpedo bombers and normal bombers and striker, and rocket planes, you could choose to swap one of those out for, say, an interceptor squadron or a scout plane squadron, whatever you want to call it, and their job was to actively look for the enemy. And then either you flew them around, maybe that would be boring, or maybe you could do a thing. So here's the thing, like Asasio and other ships, you've got limited use torpedoes, right? That can only strike certain craft. So what if your scout planes could do a strafing run with their guns or rockets, but they couldn't strike DDs? They could spot the DD, but they couldn't attack. The rockets wouldn't hit them or something, right? Again, just thinking aloud rather than practically how silly that might sound or whatever, right? But you'd have to choose that squadron and thereby sacrifice, one of your others. And then the strike aircraft. So if you said, no, I'm going with the standard loadout, then the other strike aircraft wouldn't be able to spot except when they went to lower altitude to begin their attack runs.
Yeah, because I'm more thinking of like the fighters here, be it interceptors or whatever you're looking for, where you kind of like the War Thunder artillery drop skill, where you choose, I want to deploy fighters, then you get the mini map up, or the world map up or whatever. And then you say, okay, deploy fighters in a zone here. And then you choose what kind of fighters you deploy there. Be that either with more fighters, so that they take out other fighters more easily. Interceptors that are really good at taking down strike aircraft. Or one spotting plane that would stay strictly within that radius and have, like, it would deploy one spotting buoy or whatever to that area. That would be a limited time, but it would return. Like the spotting aircraft would fly out and then return, but the spotting buoy would be, I don't know, it would be there for
So you could drop a sonar buoy or a radar buoy. Maybe radar's too controversial.
Yeah, not radar, but a sonar or hydro buoy, more like it would be a whole lot better, because it would. We already know about hydro, and then you'd get a warning. Okay, this is a hydro zone. Yeah.
And then it would act as an area denial as well, or spotting something that was smoked up and pew-pewing and everything. I like that. So I really, with not necessarily talking about the specific mechanic, but I love the idea of a CV as a support ship and a counter.
Yeah.
Rather than being the menace itself. And I think that we need more kind of mechanics and some kind of solution to make the CV more of a supporting ship, which was, I believe, one of the sort of original high-level concept ideas for the rework, was to make them more of a, rather than being a delete ships off the map, return to boat, rearm, and go out, delete next ship from map kind of thing.
And then again, we also have the idea here, like we've already talked about with the battleships, that you have different role types. So you've already mentioned a tiny bit here where with the loadout and such, instead of going loadout, we talk, okay, this is my strike build. I have the ability to strike certain types of ships well, but others not so well.
Yep.
So let's say, you go for a strike build, and you're focused on torpedoes. Let's say in my cog, I want to focus torpedoes because they're really good there. And then, the rocket planes, I would have extra dispersion of when trying to strike a DD, so it would be harder to hit them. Like those are one of the just changes that are just on the top of my head here, and I want to underline that to everybody listening right now. These are all pretty much just off the top of our head ideas at the moment. So, I want to hear from you guys what you think about the idea of different plane types, how to rework spotting and such. But one of the things that I know is very important is, of course, that once you have these different roles, you kind of have to play for them. And of course, one of the things that could happen is that your role is not at all useful in a battle, and then what do you do?
That's tricky. Well, then maybe there's an option of like you can swap out one squadron or something like that, and maybe there's like a cooldown on it. That might be an option. I don't know, because I think you're right. Like then you're almost leaning in the direction of like a Call of Duty kind of thing where you're or Battlefront, where you're like ready to spawn into the match and you see the team lineups or whatever, and then you pick a different loadout. And I think that would be too much for the format of this. If you were talking like hour-long respawnable battles, then that might work. But I think in the World of Warships format, it wouldn't work in that way. I think it would be too... you'd get the people like me that went and made a cup of coffee and forgot that they were waiting to spawn in and never arrived on the battlefield. But I do agree. This is the thing is I think it's a question of making it a decision, an active decision, and following through fully on it of like, what is the role of that ship? And I think that the question is, though, in my mind, the back of my mind, is that as much as I like a CV as a support ship, if you then gave it, well, I mean, you give it a spotting loadout primarily, and then maybe you give it torpedo bombers, and it has interceptors for enemy strike aircraft that you maybe control, and you have to shoot at them, or what, I don't know, right? And then you get like scouting planes or something. I think there could be a lot of tactical fun. It would make it a tactical challenge to be in teamwork with random people in a battle and make it work, and say, I'm going to go to this area and I'm going to actively spot and intercept planes on this side of the map. So if you guys come, I mean, does that just result in lots of lemming trains? I don't know, maybe. But I just think that the role at the moment is very confused. I think it must be very confusing for probably both long and short-term CV players, and it probably doesn't help when you see a lot of CV players that kind of rush forward through the ranks. You know, it happens to all the classes, but I think especially CV, that really don't understand like what the role is or what they're meant to be doing. So they just go, well, I don't know, I'm just going to try and strike stuff and make damage again. And inevitably they fall into the perma-spotting category because, well, there's nothing else to do with these stupid fighters. So I think that there needs to be more variation, more variety. And it would be very interesting to see if you had to pick different loadouts and see how you would cope with that challenge. Maybe there should be more that have, you know, like, as I said, maybe like deep water torpedoes is a selection option. I don't know. Some part of it is my DD heart bleeds a little bit when I'm thinking, how might this work? How might this be used against me the next time? The next time I'm out there in the Assassio. But I do think that the way it is now, it's definitely more. It's. I don't want to use the word toxic. It's less healthy for the community and the game overall, the way it currently is, if it's no longer being adjusted. And I know there's the whole backstory of like, well, they put so much money in it and it had to be a success. So it's, I wouldn't go so far as to say protected class, as a certain well-known person says, but certainly, you know, they need it to continue to be a success and an appeal and part of the game. So I guess ultimately the words are not entirely misplaced there, maybe the emphasis. So, but I think that if they were, I would say if they were being honest, they'd probably see it differently. But ultimately, it's not as much fun having the CV in the game for everybody as it could be. And I'm not saying that, oh, it should just be easy life for all the other classes and so forth. Not at all. I want CVs in the game because I think they're a valid part of the history that fit with the play style now that since the CV rework, it's more enjoyable, it's more engaged and part of the game, flying these planes around than it was before. They still need to do a few things with the ship, the capital ship itself. So here's my last thing, my last 2 cents. And again, deliberately just kind of not fully thought through. But what about just limiting the radius, the range of the planes? I'm not saying necessarily fuel. That could be an option that they have to return after a certain point. But what about just saying the planes can't go more than 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers, maybe, whatever, from the capital ship itself. And that's the limit. So you can't have this feeling of like, well, they can just float around the entire map, blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, battleships can't shoot the entire map. I mean, there's a couple of stupid ones that can shoot 30 kilometers, but any, you know, if you spec them that way. But because I think that's one of the things that gets at people is that there's a capital ship maybe on the map edge, let's go with the worst case scenario, sitting in J1, and it's striking at, you know, B8 or something, and winning the match. Even if it's taken half an hour and it's really boring and all the rest of it. And that's a point where I fully agree with people that are not fans of the C, and I say that's kind of silly. That's just ridiculous.
Okay. Quick idea, just riffing off top of that. So, you mentioned fuel length. That's a thing in War Thunder.
Okay.
You like for certain battles, you might want to go with a lot of fuel so that you're able to get in there, bomb, and get out. Or else, well, your plane is lost. So, I mean, that is something that could be brought in here. Like, you have a limited flight range on it so that you can make X amount of trips back and forth, but you will have to engage the flight back at some point. Like, the further away you are, like, let's say you have, like, a needle. There's a gauge.
Yeah.
And it actively shows you that, okay, the further you are away from the plane, from the carrier, sorry, with this, the longer this red bar is, you know, the point of no return. So that you see, okay, needle is going down, and as you start going home towards it, okay, it starts shrinking because you know that, okay, I now have fuel to stay here for a tiny bit more before I have to hit that return to carrier button. That could be a thing. Like, they played around with both oxygen and electricity being consumable or something that slowly goes down on the subs. So, yeah, I can see that being a thing on strike aircraft and fighters for that matter. Like, they're already limited, right? They're already limited in how long they stay there. So then suddenly they return because then they're bingo on fuel. They can't carry a lot. But on top of that, what you can choose is how much fuel, but that'll also do something to how quick the planes are.
Yeah, exactly. So slower planes carrying a bigger fuel load, they're out there for longer, or maybe they return quicker because they're empty. And you could have all sorts of mechanics of, like, let's say they are, you could, I mean, this goes a little bit towards the direction of, like, eventually we're going to be talking about how many planes are on the carrier as well, right? So we've kind of done that argument overall in the last 2 years to death, probably. You could have a thing of, like, you can order them to stay out and not return at low fuel, and in which case they just get ditched at some point. But that would have to be tied into there has to be a penalty for that.
Yeah.
So you have to so maybe the restore rate of your planes coming back goes down, can become slower as a trade-off for you not returning that squadron. Again, we're just, like, spitballing a few different ideas here. There's bound to be pros and cons to all of it. I think the core sentiment is that, does it need some more reworking? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Are there lots of options and ideas out? Yes. Are some of them probably relatively easy to implement? Probably also yes. So and I think the key thing there is maybe appealing to everybody, the developers and the community. Let's kind of come together and find a way forward for that, rather than this kind of impasse where we're at, where it's just, there's either the blissfully unaware or the total loggerheads, and again, I'm talking about things that overall I'd like to see in the game, but I don't like to see them persisting as a source of toxicity, a source of a big salt stick.
Yeah, and before anybody starts going, but realism, no, fuck realism, right? We're talking an arcade game here. Well, there needs to be some sort of mechanic of allowing the character to keep on using its planes, because we all remember the days where suddenly there was a text message from your carrier in chat. Oh yeah, I'm without planes. What good are you then?
Yeah,
you're floating points at that moment.
Ramming speedboat for the win.
You are at best a giant torpedo, but you're not gonna get that far. You're not gonna be able to do that. So. No. Yeah, there needs to be that sort, but so please do keep that in mind. But just keep peeking. Apparently I'm having a slight stroke. It's been a long week, okay?
Really?
Yeah.
What did you get up to?
Oh, nothing special. Only had a crazy community help me raise almost $7,500 for the Norwegian Cancer Society, but it's a minor thing. It's a minor thing.
Yeah.
Let's not get into that right now. I'm still just frazzled from that. But speaking of game balance, was where I was going with that and such. I want to go over to something that a lot of people in at least on my channel have said that they really enjoy, is when we speak about D&D. And
likewise.
And this time around, we've narrowed it down a tiny bit. I was hoping we'd have some viewer suggestions here, but it's literally about flair for your D&D campaign or character or whatever, to make it slightly bit more special. Because we've all been there. We've all sat there with our +1 longsword or whatever. And it's like, it's magical. Why are we not addressing that it's magical? It has literally been imbued with magic to allow you to hit better and harder with it. How is this not a named item? Why are we always so obsessed with only naming legendary items? I mean, things can get a name long before that. Hell, I call my guitar Bianca. She's not very legendary. She's not even magical. Should be proven by the fact that I'm not really good at playing guitar. But, you know, we're talking a player that has been given a dagger that allows you to hit better with it. You can hold it up next to an identical dagger that is not magical, and that dagger will do less damage and hit less. How are we not naming these items?
Mm-hmm.
Players, do yourself a favor out there, and DMs for that matter too. When you give a +1 item to somebody, name them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be the tears of the sun, you know? No, it can be Heart Stabber or, you know, the Dismantler or something like that. It's... Mm-hmm. Of course, those sound really scary, but
it's better than like gloves of climbing that are called sticky fingers.
Oh God, those are not sticky. Pointy.
Hairy fingers?
No. That's a natural attack from a bear. But yeah, like, name your items. It's like any armor that has a +1 on anything too. Name them. Mm-hmm. Make it special. Make it fit your character. Like a rogue wearing the shoes, Shadow Step. Huh? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do? Oh, they give a +5 to any sneak attempt. Mm-hmm. It's not massive. It's still magical. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
Am I crazy for thinking this?
I don't think so. I think it just adds to the fun. It adds. What it does is it adds to the immersion overall because it draws people in. It depends. Sometimes it's a more lighthearted moment, but overall, what you're looking for is like hooks, emotional hooks for things. Both for the DM and for the players, because it's all about, you know, that abstraction of the mind and immersing yourself in another world, in another setting, and little details often. I used to sweat buckets, and sometimes I still do, over like, oh my goodness, is this boss fight going to be enough, or is this enough of an enemy, or something like that, you know, and skinny things. But I realized over time, and it's much easier now, because it actually, little details are more important than all of those. The you know, you don't want the fight to be like a damp squib or whatever, and there's usually all these different CR calculators and stuff like that, and you get a feel for it with more experience. But actually, it's more the detail of, like, in our campaign, our party they went into an area where there was a lot of toxicity, and this was triggering some sort of undead activity. And the thing that they fought, they were in the middle of a swamp or a bog. It didn't really make much sense on the surface, on the face of it, but they fought an undead juvenile kraken. Yeah, just an undead creature that I reskinned and made it out to be a kraken, because this was relevant to the backstory of one of the players in a very loose way. That they wouldn't immediately necessarily guess, but it's a curiosity nonetheless, because a lot of them have sort of a pirating or sailing background, that kind of thing. And then they had to understand and try to uncover or do some intelligence rolls and history and things like that, and try and work out, well, what the hell would this creature be doing here? Did someone bring this here, or did they bring it here alive and then kill it, or you know, and so on and so forth? Was it conjured? And in the end, they worked out that it was actually the island that they're on is underneath the surface of the island that they're on is lots of caverns, and you know, through various history checks and intelligent things, they kind of worked out, oh, so this thing probably just lived in like pools of water and deep underwater caverns that are just beneath the surface of where we're at. And over time, at some point, it died. It's been sucked up through this bog, and eventually, because of whatever is disturbing the area, there was this thing for them to fight, you know. But typically, going back to the items and the flair, what I often do is I start off with a few really rough ideas, and then I see what my players have come up with. What's their story? Who are they? And then I observe them over a few sessions and get a feel for like how they're portraying that character and what their temperament and their behavior pattern is. Are they more, you know, communal with the group, or are they more like loners, that kind of thing? Are they very mystical? Are they religious? And then I come up with something relevant. I was just looking at one example. I created a magic item called the Tankard of Sobriety, and there was a character who was bit of a heavy drinker, borderline functional alcoholic kind of thing, you know?
Okay, yeah.
And so this item, this tankard, if they got hold of it, is basically they become cursed as soon as they get hold of the item. They are compelled to drink anything that they ever imbibe, alcoholic or not, from this tankard. And the tankard itself magically neutralizes any alcohol or toxins within any drink, so that everything basically just tastes like a cup of water or something. Yeah. And like if they try to offer it to other people or give it away, they take psychic damage. And there were all these little things that tie into it. And then I just did for the flair, I just grabbed a token icon, a token ring, a really nice tankard image that I found, and then I found an actual pendant, like a little medallion or something from a sobriety society. And then just photoshopped it all together so that this tankard has this, you know, but again, that flair. And then it meant something to the character, and it meant something to the group, because the group cared about the character they were with, but it wasn't a deep, like super deep thing of like, you know, alcoholism or something like that, but it was just, this character would be a bit clumsy in battle, you know, spells would go in the wrong direction, that kind of thing. So this became quite an important and helpful item, because the character also was kind of like regretting and wanting to change or whatever. So it was just became a fun, and that was just born out of observing the group and listening and plotting and scheming, as we like to do, you know. But I agree with you fully that it can be anything. It can just be, like you said, just giving a name to something, or maybe it doesn't have a name, maybe it just has a particular symbol on it, or a carving, or just something of intrigue that may or may not turn out to be anything. Maybe the player just ignores it and moves on. That's okay. Or maybe they later on, you've forgotten about it, and they come back and say, oh, since we're talking to the scholar that we've met 10 levels later, I take out my dagger and say, oh, what do you think? Do you recognize the symbol or whatever? And then maybe you have to improvise or but it's, at least you put something, a detail to it. And I agree. I think it just makes it that much more immersive. Or you can say, you got yourself a +1 shield. It's like, cool.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, yeah, of course, give them the stats on things, but it's we are talking about something that has been infused with magical energy. We're talking a craftsman has sat down. It's not like it's been pumped out by Ford Motor Company or something like that. No, it's a smith that has sat down. He has found the magical materials, and he has imbued it into the crafting of said item. Like, he has given something of him to do this. And how many master craftsmen out there, and I'm talking real life, do you know that pour their heart and soul into something, and they don't have an extra connection to said item? I don't think I know a single craftsman out there that doesn't do that. When you've spent so long crafting something, making something that is out of this world for somebody, or even for yourself, you gain an attachment to it, and it should be marked somehow. It should be it should be something that you see and realize. So no, the whole idea of making something extra out of it is really important to me. Like, even like you said, with a mark, you can tie that into the story. Like, be it an old family sigil or whatever, or be it the mark of an old god that is no longer worshipped. You can tie that into the story. And then suddenly you have players going, well, why is the mark of an old unworshipped god on this thing? Does it have any more? No, it could literally just be that the smith that made this, I don't know how many years ago, liked this god, but that's it. You know, he crafted this as something to be given in a ceremony to this god. Like, it's what are they called? A gift? A pledge? No. Sacrifice? No, not sacrifice. What's it called? Help me out here, Grumbles. For fuck's sake.
Ritual?
You're no. Like, you...
Offering?
Yes, it's an offering. There you go. It's supposed to be an offering to a god. Like to ask for a better harvest or whatever.
Yeah.
It could be something small like that. But suddenly, years later, well, it's still magical. What do you know? Somebody picks it up and names it Pinprick or Pinpoint or, something like that. Yeah?
Hey, you find this magically enchanted ring. The ring is called Phil.
Why? Why is the okay? Me as a player would sit down and there and go, why has somebody named this ring Phil?
You say, we don't know. Maybe there's a gem cutter that's famous within the realm. He lives a town to the north. Perhaps you should travel there and have it appraised. Maybe he knows more about Phil.
No,
and then, I'm just obviously being facetious, but I agree. It's that's the whole point, is that if you do it, it just has to have. It's just there as a not as a trick, but like as a mechanism to draw people a little further in and to get them asked. Just the fact that if you did call it Phil and that they asked about it, hopefully not in a like, this annoys me that it's called Phil, but like in a, well, that's really curious. Just the fact that they're having those thoughts and that maybe at least one of them posed the question means you've got the hook in.
Yeah.
And you've started another thread. But funnily enough, for me, sometimes the challenge is holding myself back and not wanting to make too many threads because I trip over myself. Not with bigger stuff.
Well, hell, you don't even have to do that. Suddenly, you've mentioned something in what is supposed to be a 30-second mention from a character. You have players going into the local library doing investigations into this guy. Like, why did he say this? Why was he here? Suddenly, this guy who was just going to be mentioned in a sentence twice, he's a main character. Look, why is the ring called Phil? Oh, we don't know. We need to look into this. No. You guys were on a quest to look for a dragon. No, fuck the dragon. Like, we're looking into Phil right now.
The dragon can wait.
Because players will do that.
Yeah.
Players will get hung up on things like that. Which is why it's so beautiful to be a DM sometimes. Very often, you don't even have to do anything. They will play out scenarios. They will create the story for you. Which is so cool.
Yeah.
Like you only need to give them tiny nudges to kind of get them going and everything. And then suddenly here you are. And when you mentioned this thing about like gauging players to see how they do different things and so on. And I recently saw a TikTok that was actually a long YouTube video that's just been compacted down to a few points. I sat down and I saw the entire video, and it was a beautiful video, talking all about how to give flair. And one of the things that they mentioned was critical fails. And in this video, this lady, she talked about a player that was an assassin, but it was a lawful assassin. Like it was within its right to kill. Like, it's almost a spy. Like we're talking James Bond here. Sent in on a mission to deal with somebody who had been causing problems for the royal family. Like they are actively getting the people riled up to no longer be with the royal family. And so this player sneaks into the camp, and they find this person, and then they line up the shot and throw the dagger, and they roll a 1. Like very often you see people then just say, oh well, you slip and your dagger flies wide. Yeah, it's a throwaway. Let's be fair. Add some flair to it. Add some pizzazz to it. And I had like suddenly so much respect for this lady as a DM, because what she went on to talk about, it sent chills down my spine. Let me set the story. Rogue or assassin inside the camp sees its target, lines up. There's a 1 on the dice. The dagger, however, flies true towards the target. At the last second, a door swings open, and a child comes running out and throws itself around the neck of its father. The dagger now just into the skull of said child. How do you feel as that lawful assassin guy who's just sitting there in a bush? You've just murdered a child. Like, how does that affect your character? That one, not only is your target now on high alert and in great disbelief and strife and everything, and you've probably made a nemesis in your like you've probably made a main boss character for your story by doing this.
And not only that, but like the whole realm gets to hear of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Twisted versions of it. And
Exactly.
You
are now the child killer.
Yes.
You are now the child psychopathic murderer. Yeah. Great. It's wonderful. Like that's a twist for your character. Just because you rolled a 1, suddenly something happens. Like, we're not talking something big that impacts, like suddenly your character loses an arm or something. No. We're talking story changes, which is so cool. And that's one of those many things that I just kind of went, holy shit, this is cool. This is so amazing. And I know I mentioned the story about the 5 20s in a row. I think it was last time. But what a way to turn a 1 around. What other ways could you turn a critical fail around? Without making the throwaway that they lose their weapon or it gets stuck. Like how else would you... How would you do? How would you do it, Grumbles?
I think sometimes. So I do a bit of both. It depends for me sometimes on some of it depends on the circumstance. I think the example you made is a good one where that's a big moment anyway. Because there's presumably a build-up. There's a story behind this lawful assassin and this target that they have, and it just goes into a much deeper kind of plot twist direction. I think so. Sometimes it depends. Like we had one the other day, or one of the things we did mechanically is one of my players suggested it. It's also a fantastic DM. We're not using die 20 anymore for most of the rolls. We're using 2d10. Because it just gives you different. It makes the crit hits and misses a bit rarer or whatever on averages, but when they then can become more meaningful. But that's just mechanics around it all. But I really like that assassin idea. As I said, I would temper it with depending on the circumstance. Like I wouldn't want it to be like just any old fight or whatever, but if it was like a boss or a kind of a key plot point, then I would probably try to do something similar. Things we've done in the past, we've done a lot with magics and the classic ones like the wild magics, but done them a little bit more lightheartedly and made them more humorous, rather than it either being nothing much happens where no one really sort of bats an eyelid or the world ends kind of thing. What I tend to do is I do. If I'm, what I often do more often is I make more. How many times can I get the word "often" into this one sentence? Is I try and do more of a build up of things. Like I tie it into things that have been applied to the character. Like, I think I mentioned it before, we've got the silly one with the rogue character where especially when she's trying to stealth, she steps into a bucket of fish. So we've got this thing where, for some unknown reason, buckets of fish often appear in random places around various towns that they travel to or whatever. It's like you sneak onto the roof of the tavern, but you roll low, or you roll a nat 1 on your sneak or on your acrobatics or something, and you step into a bucket of fish, and everybody in the tavern downstairs knows that you've just come home. Because they're used to this happening with, so I do things like that. So but if it was like a big pivotal moment, I would probably look at it being, if I have a story arc and maybe there's a second arc or there's something bigger looming or really slowly progressing, I might even make a circumstantial event occur. Like say there's like a demonic incursion, but it's way off. It's like, this is not even the next plot, the next arc. This is like way down the road, probably maybe not even with this party or with these same characters or whatever, but with the group, so it has more of a context and a meaning. Then I might have something randomly burst through from the abyss and arrive, and it's neither allied with who they're fighting with at the time or whatever. But this is very much like if the wild magic source, or not, it doesn't have to be that obvious. It could just be, let's say I like this to be tied to something like the assassin story, something that's kind of quite pivotal. Like they've just found this ritual book, and they're trying to, the mage is there with the cleric, and they're trying to decipher what this ritual might possibly mean. And whilst doing so, they run their fingers over a certain part of the page, and they run their investigation check or their religion check or something, and then maybe they get the crit fail, maybe without realizing that's when they summon something into the room that they weren't expecting, and it might be something that I just randomly die roll or whatever and see what happens. So I tend to do things like that. I've done over the years, like as I've learned or like from learning or being a complete novice, I did do a lot of the the kind of cheesy ones, like you said, like the weapon. In fact, we just had one even last week where they're it was in the heat of the moment and it didn't really matter all that much, but they did the I think it was a crossbow was fired or something, and it was the string snapped and it like gashes your arm or something like that, and you lose some points. But what I did is, rather than do it specific to that one moment and that one, I applied it more as a kind of the sway of the battle, if you were. Is it leaning more in their favor or not in their favor, so that you've got more than just the mechanics of like, oh wow, you're really bludgeoning this thing really well with really good attacks and everything, but like what's happening in the environment around. So there was a thing where the same character happened to be the same rogue. She had laid down a whole load of ball bearings to try and trip up a it was called a defender thing I'd created. It was like a skinned iron golem. It's made with some technology they don't understand. It's made out of a metal that they've never seen before. Nobody, in modern times or in their current time period has ever seen this before, and they're really only uncovering the very loose ends of the beginning of the story. Nevertheless, they put the ball bearings down, so I was weighing up, well, does this thing then they threw she threw some oil down, and then they set it on fire, so it was creating a fire hazard and a distraction, and what they're fighting this golem that didn't really care because it was a golem. And then I basically had like things like there was a pool of water there, and the golem just like doused the fire and washed all of these ball bearings and oil down this set of stairs out of its way, so it was no longer a hazard. And part of that was built into the golem's behavior based on like how the sway of the battle was going. Yeah. So because that character had the nat 1, so I kind of built it in a little bit more subtly rather than it being a one-time thing. So that it has more of a broader impact on the scenario. Other than that, I do one thing we did before, which is not necessarily dependent on critical misses or something, but I used to do things like, and sometimes I still do, in a very heated or complex environment. Say there's like a fog cloud in play or something, and then a wizard says, well, I cast a fireball here and I want to place it here because I can see it on the board. It's like, yeah, but you can't see that because there's a fog cloud there. So let's see how good your perception is right now as you try to cast the spell exactly where you want it to be, you know? And I'm very lucky to have a group of players who are just incredibly creative and very embracing of everything we do. So I'm able to have that freedom to do that, whereas people might otherwise be like, well, no, you're just screwing me over because I'm a really powerful character and I want to put my spell where I pointed to on the board, you know? So I tend to do things more that bend a little bit to kind of mask the mechanics a little bit, as much as it's based on the die rolls and stuff. I prefer to, maybe linking it back to your previous point, just flavor it up a little bit more rather than making it just kind of hit miss.
Yeah, because there's so many ways of playing in any sort of role playing game, really. And some people like to just play the rules. That's how simple it is. Like you play the rules, you talk about the plus ones, the minus ones, the critical fails, the critical hits, and so on, and it's very by the book. And for certain people, doing that as combat or such, cool, sure, works. However, for some of us who are, we tend to be more invested in the characters and the story. Like me, for instance, I don't always min-max my characters. That means that certain combat situations, I might not be able to hit something that a min-max character would be. So I'd rather see the flair, like we talked about, something extra, something to tie me more into the story. Like I've seen DMs just say, well, okay, critical fail, your weapon just broke. Okay, so this brand new magically imbued weapon just broke because I hit a 1 as I was trying to slash this goblin up. Yeah, okay, that's great. How I'm trying to think of ways I would do it. Well, because sometimes ones occur in the heat of battle and you need to have a quick out. But the whole idea of slashing up your buddy or something like that, it doesn't really appeal to me. Like, yeah, it can happen by all means, but sometimes I'd rather want it to be something extra, because no matter if it's a crit fail or a crit hit, it's a moment that, as you said, turns the battle in some way. Or gives an advantage or disadvantage, all depending on how you see it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily always have to be that this player does something stupid or something fantastic. No, it can also be turned the other way around, so that the receiving end is super lucky or super unlucky, all depending on how you see it.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. I'd rather turn it into something that again, that gives you more of an emotional hook, you know, rather than just the obvious, you know, you hit your buddy in the back, as you said. It could be something more like, well, you hit their backpack. In their backpack, they were carrying a rather volatile concoction in a vial that you were planning to plant and use as a, you know, distractive kind of explosive device to get everybody's attention at the big wedding ceremony next week, blah, whatever, you know. And you crack this thing open, their backpack is now on fire, and a trail of fire runs down, you know, the back of their leg, and they have to decide whether they're going to like work to put that fire out somehow, or they're going to take some burn damage next round, or, you know, so you make it more inconvenient. Or you do something like, you know, in the environment, you cut the rope that was holding the chandelier above the table, you know, where the wedding cake was, poof, it's gone. You're now hated by the bride, the bridesmaid, the groom, all the parents. The entire room turns against you or something, you know, where you're trying to convince them that the king is actually a mind flayer in disguise. Nobody believes you, and they want to have you jailed, or you'll get exiled out of the town, or, you know, again, there's usually some degree of humor, but it doesn't always have to be humorful. It can sometimes just be quite a deadly circumstance.
Like a child being murdered.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe you hit a lever at the back of the room, open the door, and 15 guards run into the room.
Ooh.
Or you hit the gong.
Yeah, you let loose the 20 tigers that were being held captive for the gladiator battles. Oh gods. Oh, I gotta use that one day. Oh my word.
We had a good one that was not. I don't think it was a critical one, but it was a horribly low roll. Where just in the last week, where the paladin was, in order to be a distraction and help to get his allies out of the room to safety, fighting this golem, because the golem they're only level 5, so it was kind of kicking their ass. It was designed to be one of those you should probably run away kind of encounters. But they decided not exactly to run away. Some were running away, and some were being a bit more engaged. And the paladin decided to jump on this thing's back and tie a rope around its neck, or try and bucking bronco this thing, right, which is kind of ridiculous for this golem. But anyway, the golem grabbed hold of him and was trying to basically use him as a club on an ally once, and then throw him over the side of the wall over, and he actually got a crit success on his athletics to try and hold on to the rope that he had around the neck of this thing. So I ruled that the golem, they'd just been traveling through this swamp and this bog for many days, for a week or more, and they're all filthy and haven't had baths. And so I just ruled that he grabbed his greave, and because he hung on for dear life and he had the rope and all these extenuating circumstances, that the golem basically ripped his greave off of his leg and flung it over the side of this chasm that they're above. So he's now only got one. In fact, I think we discovered later in the fight I'd forgotten that he wasn't wearing shoes. That was canon for some reason. Anyway, he lost all of the armor and everything that's covering one of his legs. So he's now walking around with one naked leg and one armored leg, and he's got to work out what he's going to do about that. I said mechanically we won't worry about it with AC, but you should be aware that if something strikes through your legs, or you step in an acid pool or something like that, that leg is going to be particularly vulnerable. So that's just something. Then as they finish the fight, like, he's limping off the battlefield, so it had this lingering subtle effect, and that was born off of a crit success for him contesting the golem to throwing him over the chasm. So that's what you got to watch out for in my games, is you don't only lose on a crit 1, you might lose on a crit 20 or a crit success as well.
Yes, but what do you gain?
Well, he gained his life and not being thrown into a chasm.
Yeah, there you go.
We all had a good chortle about it anyway.
Well, I can see that we're coming up on 2 hours very quickly here, actually. There is another subject I wanted to talk about, but I think this is going to carry over way too long. But I want to extend a question to all the partners we know on Twitch, and all the partners we don't know on Twitch. Because this goes out around that as a subject. We've been talking about partnering on Twitch, like what it takes to become a partner, and if there should be more steps between being an affiliate and being a partner. We've also talked about wanting more communication from Twitch regarding what is it they're looking for in a partner. Is it different for everybody? Like, what kind of metrics are they looking at? What is the experience of other partners in this process? Simply put, that is what I want to hear. I know a few people had to apply several times for this. And I want to know their stories, because I don't have that insight. I was one of the lucky ones to be accepted on my first try. So I literally went by the numbers and worked my ass off that way. But I want to hear from others regarding this. Like, what was their experience with trying to become partner? Like, what did Twitch say they were looking for, in the way of numbers, or like something that would have to happen on your channel in order for you to be partner? I want to hear from others on this. So if you hit me up either on DMs on Twitch or preferably DMs on Discord, because I realize that not everybody might want to have this as public information or such, but if you're interested in weighing in on this, or possibly even talking to us about this on a podcast once, please let us know. We want to know more. But I'm just gonna skip straight over that one for now, and go to our last little segment that has become a thing. Something to smile about. And not long ago, I found something that really made me smile, which I absolutely loved. I even had to take a screenshot of it. It was an Instagram post where a mother talks about how her 6-year-old is going back to school soon. And the school has literally said that they've missed out on a lot of school through COVID, and that they all need to catch up. So I read that part. I was like, what? They've had nothing but school. What the crap is this about? And then I read the next few lines, and I was like, oh, because the next few lines are literally, so next week, all lessons are canceled. It's non-uniform, so no school uniform or anything. And it's going to be only games and outdoor learning and campfires. So they're catching up on making memories. And I absolutely love that. And whereas the experience through COVID is its own memory, by all means, there are so many things that I know that I did when I was in school. Like, for instance, the campfires and such. Going camping. Those were some of my favorite days. Because you did something else than just sit around and learn.
Yep.
You had a different environment for learning. You could have a conversation with people and with your teachers in a different way. It wasn't this environment where you were being talked to. No, you were having an actual conversation about things. And the idea that they're doing that. Sorry, I'm a bit gassy. I've had a Coke. And the idea that they're actively going out and saying, nope, no lessons, we're gonna have fun. It absolutely gave me the biggest smile I've had in a long time. And of course, this week's charity has also made me smile a lot. More on that a different time.
Indeed.
How about you?
Well, I actually have like a hard time this time around because, one, I've got like a list, and even just sitting here, it keeps growing and growing. Right. Two, part of the problem is because I feel like some of it I'm cheating slightly.
Okay.
Because it's probably too close to home, too personal or inner circle or whatever you want to call it. But so, and part of the, and so the other one is like, well, pick something, damn it. Right. And the other part is like, well, but I want to pick all of them. And also some of them are just so, God, I'm looking at this list and I'm like, how do I pick this? Here's how I'm gonna cheat.
Okay.
So this is behind the DM's curtain. So what made me smile? What made me smile is not one specific thing this time, and I will try not to do this again, for at least not next time.
Okay.
Maybe the time after that. But what made me smile was community spirit. And I want to put this in the context of like COVID and also just the modern way of life and all this technology and into web and whatever. So community spirit. And here are my examples. My D&D group were reminiscing a bit or sharing some ideas or whatever, and they put out there, well, and we've been playing together for like over 5 years as a group. And we're all just randoms who like drifted and found each other over the interweb. And we've become like the dearest of friends. Like it's a really caring, creative group that just, you know, we treasure this thing, and we do this every Wednesday, and hardly ever does anything come in between. Sometimes real life does. And then we miss a week here and there, whatever. But just this feeling of this kinship and this friendship that can endear and endure and survive all of the things that the world throws at you. And again, just occurring, and it's also international. It's people from like all over the world. And I love that. And this feeds just into, this is just one example of we got the news that the Grumpies beat COVID. Yeah. And that makes me just so happy in my heart, and a tear to my eye, and just seeing the community and how everyone's missing. And like, if he, you know, because Grumpy himself been so tired and so weak, he's not even been able to hang around because he's not even been at the computer, or he hadn't drunk a cup of coffee in a week or 10 days or something, you know, because it's just feeling that bad. And just seeing how everybody responds in the community across whatever channel, you know, in our sort of broader circle, Bob's and beyond. It's just amazing to see, you know, immediately everyone jumps on it and sends the well wishes and all that kind of thing. So hearing and seeing that they were beating this thing made me smile incredibly. And then the next one was and this links back to the last point you just made, was the community, and I love these tweets. I know I've already had the one with that Twitter account, but I keep seeing loads and loads more tweets about with the words, you know, if you can in a world, or if you can be anything, be kind. And I keep seeing this week over and over, various from different sources, ones that feature a cow, and every single time it's somebody usually like lying down, the cow's having a nap, or someone was playing a guitar to a cow. Yeah, and it made me think of you singing your cow songs last night, right? And so I'm going to circle this all back round, and like the thing that put the biggest smile with the Grumpies as a little like crowning gem on it, was just how you performed and entertained all of those last 7 days. Seeing you like, I respect you, and I love you to bits, and I really enjoy your entertainment and your open and sort of earnest and the integrity you show in you being yourself and dealing with all your, you know, your mind gremlins and all the rest of it. Yeah. But you just come into a different level of delivery and putting, you know, having your heart on your sleeve and just making it real and emotional. Talk about emotional hooks and all that, as we were talking about before. You just take it way off, you know, turn everything up to 11, whatever cliches or phrases you want to use. And that just put the biggest smile on my face for like the longest time, the whole 7 days. And then seeing obviously the result and the community spirit coming through. So my slightly cheating pick for this week is just in a broader sense, the community spirit, and feeling, especially under the current conditions and everything, and the context of it being the interweb, feeling like you don't know people, or that there's this separation, but then actually getting to know and embrace them over such an extended period of time. It's just incredible. And it just shows that, because I've always tried to be a believer, no matter whatever, you know, slap in the face life has given me, that we're always better and stronger together, and there's so much more good in the world or in society that if you only allow it to be and encourage people to bring it forth. And so my that's my pick is just community spirit. And you're the big cake, and the Grumpy's beating COVID, and everybody responding to that and being so happy for them is like the icing on the top of that cake. So there you go. It's not one particular thing. If I had to pick a thing, there's a little thing that just put a smile, then it would just be people playing guitar and singing to cows.
It's a pretty good thing.
It is a pretty good thing. Yeah.
It is. I wonder if the burgers from those cows would get better. Sorry, I had to go and ruin it.
Wow.
Oh, wow, Tiger, come on. Honestly, though, I do think that there is a whole thing about a less stressed animal and such, but, you know, we're not going to go into that.
No.
I love beef also as food. I mean, what?
And I'm so now I've got this image
I'm not making it better.
This woman calmly singing, strumming a guitar and singing, and when this cow just laying back to fall asleep, and then the camera pans around, and there's this bloody 6'5" chunky guy there with a big butcher's cleaver. Like, good job, Alice.
You'll be tender. You'll be savory.
Oh no! And then the camera pans, and there's just blood. Oh no.
You will taste good on my grill, and I'll feed you to my children. I think we're going to end it there.
Yeah, I think we're on that musical note.
With that being said, with that being done, thank you so much for exiting to port together with me once again, Grumbles. And thank you to the people at home for exiting to port and playing along. Please do let us know your thoughts on this on our respective Discords. And for partners, please do reach out. Hit us up on twitch.tv/grumblesthedwarf and twitch.tv/tigersden. And hopefully we will see you around. Goodbye.
Indeed. Thanks for listening.